Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth branch program, the place for common sense. This is segment 2 of the program. Usually we have 3 segments. Segment 1 which happened at 10 o'clock, segment 2 at 12, and segment 3 at 2. But today we're going to combine segment 2 and segment 3. And the topic is warning sign. Yesterday we started the discussion about the warning sign which point to a number of events that are happening today here in the United States of America, which resemble a great deal events that happened 80 years ago, and the outcome was devastating for the world. It was World War II. Now, the topic will be an individual that we come to hate because he was a dictator, he was a monster, he was one of the most hated leaders that of modern time. But we also, in conversation across the country, we also found out that there is a high level of misconception about that individual. And I'm going to show you why, if we ought not to repeat the mistake of the past, we pay attention to history, we pay attention to the warning sign, and we, as citizens of the United States, ought not to shrug it off. Because I can show you, in all fairness, that there was a point in our time, and some of us were already born, that we here in the United States, we shrug off the possibility of disasters. We shrug off the possibility of tragedies, and we paid a price for it. So this is no time to play politics. This is no time to be fighting or spinning information, spinning news, but rather to decide, does our country have priority over politics? Does our country have priority over individuals? Or do we simply not care what happens next in our society? And this is where we will start, and we will show you a snapshot of the events we're talking about, and we will go back 80 years to show you how this whole process unfolded and what we are looking at today, and why we believe those are warning signs that we here in the United States of America cannot ignore, because it would be at our own peril. I am MD, host of the fourth branch program, and we're talking about the warning sign of impending tragedy in the United States of America. Here in the United States, the word patriot is equivalent to standing up, put your hand on your chest during national anthem, and as far as those individuals who define patriotism as such, as far as they're concerned, that's the end of patriotism. No matter what they do that damage the country, it doesn't matter, because during national anthem, they stand up, they put their hand on their chest. And to them, that's all there is to it. Well, I've been, I personally been a very good admirer of George Washington. Not just because he was the first president of the United States, not just because he was a great president, but because there was something rather interesting about George Washington. His words are not just for the sake of speaking. His words mean something. George Washington was the first president who could have been in the Oval Office. There was no Oval Office, obviously, symbolically speaking, who could have been in the Oval Office until his death, till he died. But after 2 terms, he voluntarily, nobody asked him to, he voluntarily walked away because he believed that power corrupts people. He is a guy who had the whole country behind him, admired, a great man, someone who could have taken advantage because there was nothing in the Constitution that could have prevented him from being in President of the United States until he died. But after 2 terms, he walked away from the Oval Office, but he didn't just go and resort to his private life. In fact, he continued to serve the country. But George Washington had something very important about him, a characteristic that you very rarely find in people who have climbed to that level. He wasn't corrupted by power, and he did not abuse that power. And it was at a time that he could have, but he did not. George Washington warned us, and that's something you saw that was put on the screen. He warned us to guard against the imposture, from the imposture of patriotism. And that's what today we have, unfortunately, that we have a whole political party, that's the executive branch and the legislative branch alike, that have managed to dumbify the Republican constituent and make them believe that they are patriots and they're doing everything that's undermined the very Constitution that George Washington helped to craft to preserve the Republic. What I'm about to talk about now is extremely important. It's not just gibberish, it's not just somebody's opinion, but I'm going to show you that there is a pattern, there is a similarity that is currently being drafted right under our eyes that resemble very closely what happened in Germany 80 years ago. A few months ago, I published a documentary worth several hours of conversation, of video, about the striking similarities between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler. His supporters shrug it off, other people just ignore it, think this is over the top. And as such, a lot of people stay in the ignorance of really not understanding a lot of things about people with power, especially people who are inclined to be dictators, people who believe that they can use power to do whatever that they want. I got some pushback from individuals who are obviously Trump fanatics. I don't say supporters, because I consider someone who supports someone else as an individual who can rationalize and realize when the person is wrong to move away from the person. But in the Trump world, nobody has that kind of brain power to see, to understand what is actually going on and to move away from it. I believe it was Abraham Lincoln who said that, or could be Jefferson. I could mistake those two guys, but nevertheless, he said that as long as someone is in the right, I will support that individual. But once the person stops doing what's right, I can no longer support that person. And then when it comes to matters of our country, that's the way it should have been, especially with legislators, people who understand history, people who understand how history evolved, people who know history, people who have record of how certain things, certain events evolve from certain other events. So if you cannot rely on those individuals to make the right decision, then we can say in all fairness that for that political party, this is over for the constituent, but also it's something that can impact the whole nation. The comparison between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler is very much warranted, and I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you also why you cannot just shrug it off, walk away from it, not pay attention and think, hey, this thing cannot happen in America. Because it can happen in America. Everything that's bad that has happened in the world did not happen in one day, in one swoop. Especially when it comes to dictators, it is a very gradual process. But more specifically, in countries which have had democracy for a while, such as America. Now pay close attention. When Adolf Hitler was Chancellor of Germany, he was going to be the one that triggered World War II. It started with some riffraff with Poland. You know, they have a border, Poland and Germany. So Adolf Hitler created some sort of problem with Poland. And in 1939, between 1939 and 1940, Germany invaded Poland. And that's what's going to trigger World War II. That's how it started. World War II is from 39 to 45. But it started with what I just mentioned. Germany having some sort of rift with Poland, but it was false pretense. The story, the real story, the detail behind that story, all that is explained on the documentary we did about Adolf Hitler, which can be found on the People Branch YouTube channel. World War II According to record, there were at least 70 to 85 million people who were killed, soldiers and civilians. A lot of countries in the world don't even have that many people. Which means you would have to combine a lot of countries, a lot of those countries in order to get to that number. 85 million people lost their lives. In fact, even the number of civilians who lost their lives, which means people were not directly involved in the war, were estimated at between 19 to 28 million. A lot of countries don't even have that number as population. That was great casualties. Great casualties in the war, the World War II. But could it have been avoided? Could it? Well, it's a good question. So let's take a look at that and see. In the documentary in which I compare Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler, I said the following. Those two men, 80 years apart, they have all the same characteristics. You see how much Donald Trump has been calling the media fake news? Adolf Hitler was doing exactly that, except he wasn't using the word fake. Fake is modern. He was saying that he was calling the media, accusing the media rather, of fabrication. Now let me walk you through how Adolf Hitler was created. We're not going to talk about his childhood or anything of this sort. We're just going to show you that whenever the name Adolf Hitler is used, most people just associate it to that monster that caused World War II, and this is where the conversation focused, but nobody pay attention to, or never cared to pay attention to. But the context is extremely important in order to understand how not to let something like that repeat in our time frame. Because just accusing Adolf Hitler as a monster is fine and dandy, but how did Adolf Hitler happen? Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany in January of 1933. January 30th, 1933. A month later, there was a fire that broke in one of the House's chamber. We're talking about Germany, but the system is pretty similar to the United States. They have Reichstag and Reichsrat, which are equivalent to Congress and the Senate. So they have the House where they do their debate just like here in the United States. A fire broke in the lower chamber. Now, actually, Germany has never resolved that problem. Notice how far back it happened, 1933. So they never could pinpoint that problem to an individual or to a group. But it is without doubt that it was the Nazi that did that. Now, historians stay away from that kind of speculation. I don't. And the reason that I believe that's the case is because prior to Adolf Hitler grabbing enough power in order to push all the other political parties, pretty much eliminate all the other political parties, his close advisors were suggesting that for him to overthrow the government, really get rid of everybody, kill whoever is not on board. And Adolf Hitler refused. He would not go that route. So an incentive was needed. Now, all that I just told you happened even prior to Adolf Hitler becoming the Chancellor of Germany. By the way, the Chancellor of Germany is the most important person that Germany and the world know, because we don't know much about the rest, the other aspect of the government. We don't care because the world deals with the Chancellor, just like Chancellor Angela Merkel. That's the only person we've been dealing with, or the world has been. So before Adolf Hitler became Chancellor, his close advisor, there was a meeting at some point in which someone was tasked to delay Adolf Hitler from coming into the meeting so that the other high power individual could talk about the strategy, how to convince Adolf Hitler to help overthrow the government. And the reason they needed Adolf Hitler is because Adolf Hitler was a very charismatic person, charming. You would not believe it, but that was the case. He was a very charming person. So they needed Adolf Hitler to do the rallying, the charismatic aspect, so that there would be more people joining the Nazis. So when Adolf Hitler showed up, of course they already discussed it among themselves, what they're going to say to him. So when he came, I guess the top guy approached him, and everybody was already there except for him. So maybe at that time he realized why he was delayed. Adolf Hitler was also a very smart individual. So, and they told him that everybody here already decided, we already talked about it, we think the way forward is to overthrow the government. That's what the Nazi, the group that was, by the way, Adolf Hitler did not start as a Nazi, but they sought him out because of his charisma, and they thought that they could make use of him. So the story is, they already made up their mind how they're going to deal with the situation, but they needed someone like Adolf Hitler because of his charisma, and they know that they need that in their midst. So Adolf Hitler walked in, everybody was already there, the point person, the main person, the most powerful person in the group told him that he is what we decided, that he is the way forward. We're going to overthrow the government. Adolf Hitler said no. When they tried to convince him, he walked out. So when people are talking about Adolf Hitler, I know it's not a requirement to understand the history of Germany, but in order for you to understand what is currently going right here in the United States of America, to see the parallel and to see how close we're moving towards what happened in Germany, you have to understand exactly how Adolf Hitler was created, was formed, was shaped. Adolf Hitler walked out of the meeting because he said, no, I'm not going to overthrow any government. I want everything to be done legally. So contrary to popular belief, Adolf Hitler was more a by-the-book guy than Donald Trump today. Donald Trump had undermined our Constitution. Adolf Hitler didn't do that. Adolf Hitler used the Constitution to gain as much power as he needed for him to become the dictator that the world has known him as. But Adolf Hitler did not do anything outside the boundaries of the Constitution of Germany. Much less that we can say about Donald Trump. So when we're talking about Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump and comparing them, and people are shrugging that off, I understand you may not have the knowledge to understand that's the case, but that is the case. So Adolf Hitler walked out of the room, but Adolf Hitler didn't walk out of the room and giving up on policy. In fact, Adolf Hitler was a very ambitious guy, so he managed to network and negotiate his way. There was a guy by the name of von Papen, who was a former chancellor of Germany. That's the guy that Adolf Hitler networked with, who actually convinced the then president of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, to nominate Adolf Hitler as the chancellor of Germany. So Adolf Hitler walked away from trying to overthrow a government, but walked into the political aspect of things and managed to become chancellor of Germany legitimately. So remove from your mind that Adolf Hitler was a dictator, meaning that Adolf Hitler just overthrew the government of Germany. That did not happen that way. Adolf Hitler was legitimately appointed chancellor of Germany the same way that Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, Russia help notwithstanding. But I did not mean to talk about all that, except to give you an understanding as to how Adolf Hitler managed to become the dictator he had become, and why we should pay close attention, because what is currently going on in Washington with the Republican Congress and the Republican Senate actually sent chill to my bone, because knowing what had happened in Germany and seeing what the Republican Congress, the members of the Republican Congress and the members of the Republican Senate are doing, it actually get me to be afraid of what is currently going on. So in January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany. Germany was a democracy just like the United States of America. Nothing different. It has Congress, Senate. It has all the same type of constitutional aspect of a democracy. So the same Nazi, that's where I mentioned I speculated, because Adolf Hitler would not go along with overthrowing the government. So the Nazis were playing a kind of a support team in the back end. So Adolf Hitler managed to get von Papen to talk Paul von Hindenburg, then president of Germany, into nominating him as the Chancellor of Germany. So, within just a month into the chancellorship, because there was a fire that broke in one of the houses, that's why the act, the decree passed, called the Reichstag Fire Decree. Because on February 28, 1933, Adolf Hitler proposed to then President Paul von Hindenburg to pass a decree called the Reichstag Fire in order to be able to protect the state, in order to be able to protect the citizen of Germany. That was the idea. At least that's what Adolf Hitler said. But I want you to pay close attention. All that Adolf Hitler was doing, he never strayed away, he never violated, he never undermined the Constitution of Germany. He stayed within the boundaries of the Constitution, much less than we can say about Donald Trump. So when I compare Donald Trump with Adolf Hitler, in the beginning, Adolf Hitler was a better man than Donald Trump, because at least he respected the Constitution. Donald Trump doesn't. So for those who were just shrugging it off as if there is no comparison between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler, I beg to differ. At the very least, in the beginning of the Adolf Hitler reign, he went by the book, he went and walked within the limits of the Constitution. Can we say the same thing for Donald Trump? So Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and the Nazis, he supports him, which he rejected outright, but they would not let go. They figured out that now that Adolf Hitler was Chancellor of Germany, we needed to strengthen his hand. So what did they do? They set one of the houses on fire. By the way, this is not recorded in history. And up to today, even the government of Germany never come to a final conclusion as to who set the fire. But logic should tell us that the Nazis, who were supporters of Adolf Hitler, did that. So I want that to be clear. This is my speculation added to it, because when you follow the remaining aspect of history, you would find out that was exactly what the Nazis had in mind. Now, those who set the house on fire must have given order by one of the higher up. But Adolf Hitler was completely out of that for the time being. But he took advantage of it. He went to then President Paul von Hindenburg and said, well, it looks like we have a problem, because it looks like communists are trying to hurt the country. They're trying to hurt the citizen of the country. So it is not a bad idea to pass a decree so that we can get to the bottom of that. As you can tell, he stayed within the boundaries of the Constitution, because only the president could do that. So he gave the president a nudge. But he did not violate the Constitution. He advised the president to do that, and the president signed it. Now, the president could have decided not to. And there was absolutely nothing Hitler could have done about that. But according to the Constitution of Germany at that time, known as the Weimar Republic, the president had that kind of power. So the president signed a decree. But that was also a mistake, because that decree provided the chancellor office the ability to trample civil rights and civil liberties of all Germans. Just the same way that after 9/11 here in the United States, our government pretty much take over our civil liberties, take over democracy in the name of protecting the mainland. Yes, all governments always do that. They use an opportunity to do something that's unacceptable. So if we ought to blame Adolf Hitler for doing that, then we ought to blame our government the same way for doing that here in the United States as well. That's what governments do. That's why George Washington believed that power corrupts. Because people who have power are almost always inclined to abuse that power. We saw that happen after 9/11 right here in the United States of America. So what exactly happened? Now here's the important part to pay attention to. The Reichstag fire decree gave the Chancellor office, led by Adolf Hitler, power to really nullify any type of civil liberty of German citizens, because that was the job of the Chancellor office, to ensure security in the country, to protect the mainland from all enemy, communists and otherwise. That was the pretense used by Adolf Hitler to get the president to sign the decree. But I want you to follow very closely. Mr. Hitler stayed within the boundaries of the Constitution of Germany. It did not undermine it. It did not violate it. Because had the president said no, that would have been the end of the story. The president signed the decree, gave the chancellorship power. Now power to do a lot of things. By the way, power to crush freedom of expression. Yes, you heard correctly that the media could not publish any piece that would undermine the effort of this chancellorship to protect the mainland. Meaning, if it's not flattery article, if it's not flattery publication, you could not print it. That was Hitler's first move to gain power, but it didn't stay there. Now, the Reichstag fire decree was signed by the President of Germany on February 28, 1933, just 1 month after Adolf Hitler has become Chancellor of Germany. So in my speculation, the Nazi set one of the houses on fire in order to trigger a reason for the chancellor to do something. And sure enough, Adolf Hitler took advantage of that and get the president of Germany to sign the Reichstag fire decree, which gave his office, the chancellor office, which gave his office a lot of freedom. The chancellor could easily ignore all civil liberties of all Germans, because the job is to protect Germany. The job was to protect the citizen of the country. At least that's what Adolf Hitler gave as pretense. Adolf Hitler was also, looks like, good politician. But here's the part I want you to pay really very, very close attention to. Because as much as the world liked to blame Adolf Hitler for being a monster, the story as to how Adolf Hitler became a monster was never told, or is never told. We prefer to just look at Adolf Hitler as the monster because, you know, as a dictator, he killed 6 million Jews. So we like to dwell on that aspect and not understanding how did it get to that point. Adolf Hitler was not a politician, so to speak. He fought in World War I as a soldier. He didn't climb the armed forces ladder. As far as we know, he didn't even finish school. But he was very smart. But here's the part I want you to pay close attention and to see, so that you can understand why, when I see those kind of things happening right here in the United States of America, I cannot but have flashback that as a country, we're not paying attention to what's going on, and we think we fighting as constituent or as legislator for political parties, although our focus is supposed to be for our country, for the republic. You see, the people who voted for Donald Trump continue to support him despite all the damages he has caused to the nation. And now you have Republican legislators, both in Congress and the Senate, that continue to protect him, to defend him, to shield him, and to do everything possible not to help him undermine our Constitution. That's not patriotism. Pay close attention to what I'm about to say. Because Adolf Hitler, the monster known as Adolf Hitler, could not possibly exist unless he had help. And listen closely, because history is written for a reason. We cannot dwell in the past, but we have to look at the past in order not to repeat the mistakes of the past. We cannot ignore the past. No, we're not going to dwell on it, but we need the past so that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. So listen very closely and tell me if we're not watching the same thing evolving right here in America. One, keep in mind, Adolf Hitler did not overthrow the German government. Adolf Hitler was legitimately appointed Chancellor of Germany. Adolf Hitler stayed within the boundaries of the Constitution of Germany. Did not go outside the Constitution, much less we can say about Donald Trump. And Adolf Hitler lobbied Congress and the Senate, Reichstag and Reichsrat for Germany, lobbied them to pass an act which will benefit him, but nevertheless stayed within the boundaries of the Constitution. Adolf Hitler managed to convince members of Congress and the Senate in Germany in 1933 to pass the act known as the Enabling Act of 1933. And here's in a sense, what the Enabling Act does. It gives the cabinet, which is led by Chancellor Adolf Hitler, the power to enact laws without the involvement of Reichstag. Now think about it in this term. It's an individual, let's take the President of the United States, who can come up with laws without having to go to Congress. Think about it that way and see what that means. It can come up any day with any law that is so wish, and that will become law. Say, journalists should not put anything bad about me. That's the law from now on. Imagine what that means for the United States of America. Now, before you say that's never going to happen in America, let's think about how it happened to begin with. It was members of Congress and the Senate that passed the act. Adolf Hitler didn't take over power. Congress and the Senate gave him that power. Now, it's mind-boggling to me how hundreds of people could sit in a room and craft an act to give that kind of power to an individual. It passed the first chamber, the second chamber, and then it's signed by the president of Germany. It's mind-boggling to me how it happened, but the bottom line is more important, that Congress and the Senate did that. There would be no Adolf Hitler without the enablers, which means Congress and the Senate. What do you see happen today with the Republican Congress and with the Republican Senate? What do you see happen? During the first 2 years of Trump administration, what did you see happen? They just didn't care. Whatever whatever Trump did, it didn't matter to them. And what do you see happen despite the fact that Republican Congress is not in the majority? They're trying to prevent Democrats from exercising oversight. What do you see happen with the Senate? The Senate is going against everything that Democrat is trying to do to exercise oversight. You think it cannot happen in America? So when people think of Adolf Hitler, they think of him as a monster. But Congress and the Senate in Germany created that monster. Adolf Hitler could not have existed without Congress and the Senate enabling him. That's what I want you to understand. When you think those kind of things cannot happen, look at the warning sign. During the 2 years Republicans were in full control, they let anything happen. Now that Republicans are not in control of the House, they try everything. They spin our news. They go on first to amplify their false narrative. They shield the president. They defend the president. They accuse the other side. They pretty much become another body of the government that's fighting against the very body that's supposed to exercise oversight on the executive branch. Think about that for a moment and fast forward it and see how far it gets. You think that cannot happen in America? Me personally, when I see those things happen, it sends chill to my bone, because here are the members of the Republican Party, the legislators of both Congress and the Senate in the Republican side, completely siding with the President of the United States to undermine the Constitution of the United States. You think that cannot happen in the United States? The same way Congress and the Senate, the legislative body, are to exercise oversight on the executive branch, that's the same way it is in Germany. That's their job. And what did they do? They passed the Enabling Act of 1933, which gave the cabinet, the German cabinet, plenary power. Translation in English, at that point, Adolf Hitler could do anything he wants, and there would be no accountability. Nobody could ask him any question, because at that time, whatever he did was for the good of the country. At least that was the idea. They passed the Enabling Act of 1933, good for 4 years, renewable twice, which means a total of 12 years. Adolf Hitler did not become a monster by himself. Yes, that's the only person we're pointing fingers to. But you have to understand that Congress and the Senate were accomplices of that. They made Adolf Hitler. They created Adolf Hitler. Because to them, it was more important to side with someone who can give them power, someone that had power, than it was for the country. That's the exact same thing we're observing right here in the United States of America. The Republican legislators, the congressmen, the senators, they're more interested in siding with the President of the United States than to defend the Constitution of the United States. So no, I'm not at all comfortable about the idea it cannot happen in the United States. Because the people who created Adolf Hitler are the same people today that are helping to create Donald Trump. That's the exact same thing that happened in Germany. Yes, we're not there yet where they would give plenary power to Donald Trump, but is it far-fetched to think? Because if you watch how the Republicans have moved from thinking Donald Trump is out of the line now to defending whatever action it takes, including even having collaboration with a foreign entity. We saw the Republican legislators make 2 trips to Russia, and up to today the country doesn't have any idea what they went to Russia for. Of course, they give you some kind of cockamamie story and tell you that it was to help the relation with Russia. That's kind of something that they just said, but nobody knows for certain what Republican, 2 separate delegations since Donald Trump has been president, that took trips to Russia, and we, the citizens of the country, have no idea what they went to Russia for. And you think it's impossible for the Republican to do what those senators, those congressmen in Germany did for Adolf Hitler? Have you seen how the Republican legislators have been protecting, defending, spinning information for Donald Trump? You think that's impossible? Which brings me to this. How many people in the United States of America would even believe the idea the possibility that a tragedy like that could happen in America? How many people do you think? I would venture to say zero. Because even our government at that time did not even take seriously the intelligence that says there was going to be some kind of tragedy, some kind of attack in America. Even our government did not buy that idea. Yes, the very people whose job is to protect the mainland did not even buy that idea. So which means we did not buy the fact that 9/11 could happen in America, but it did. So when I see the Republican legislators, congressmen, and senators doing these things that they're doing to protect Donald Trump, to shield Donald Trump, to defend Donald Trump, and to spin all kind of information that clearly show that Donald Trump has been doing wrong by the country, by the Constitution, that really sent chill to my bone, because I remember exactly what happened in Germany in 1933. The Congress and the Senate went along and passed the Enabling Act of 1933, which gave Adolf Hitler plenary power. You think it's far-fetched that here in the United States that can happen? Have you seen the way Republican legislators, congressmen, and senators have been behaving? You think that's far-fetched? First, they were going to hold Donald Trump accountable. Remember? They started with, this behavior is not acceptable for someone running for president. And they keep moving the goalposts. And at some point, they're all singing, well, if Robert Mueller says Donald Trump has done something wrong, we will act accordingly. Have you seen the Republicans? Yes, that Republican legislators do not give me any comfort whatsoever that we already know they're no patriot, because they're not doing the job, the primary job. The primary job of legislators, exercise oversight on the executive branch. They're not even doing that. And you think it's a comfort that they would not do something to get Donald Trump to become another dictator in America? Adolf Hitler became a dictator in a democracy. You know what happened? They bought into the idea that Adolf Hitler would protect the citizen, would protect the nation, and they passed an act that gave him that kind of power. Yes, it was the Congress and the Senate in Germany who created Adolf Hitler. Yes, they created that monster. And I'm looking at the exact same thing happening right here in America. And you know the sad thing? Americans do not learn. 9/11 happened. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody would even fathom the idea something like that could happen in America. And yet, it did happen. And today, we're watching. We could say, in all fairness, that nobody saw 9/11 coming. But we cannot say we don't see what we're watching coming, because we have been watching the warning sign getting stronger and stronger, and yet we shrug it off. It's a bunch of dumb-lipped talking all kind of gibberish. Did you know that in Germany there were a small group of people who were warning about Adolf Hitler? You know that? Well, there was. Some of them had to flee the country. Some of them lost their lives. Here in America, it is always mind-boggling to me that the very people who claim to be patriots are the very first one who would not blink, bat an eye to undermine the Constitution, undermine the rule of law, and they think putting their hands on their chest and standing during the national anthem makes them patriot. No, that does not make you a patriot. If you are a patriot, you cannot not be outraged. Because this is not a matter of being Democrat or being Republican. Because the very reason that our democracy survives is because of that very structure of our government. The minute that you don't have any oversight, then at that point, the idea of democracy in the United States of America ceases to exist. So if you are a Republican and you think it's okay, then you too are no patriot. There is no other word of saying it. No matter what you hear people saying, trying to sugarcoat, trying to go around to explain it to you, that's all it means. If you are okay with what is currently going on with Donald Trump, with the Republican Party, you categorically are not a patriot. And no matter what you think of yourself, you are not a patriot. Because a patriot is someone who would give or who would make sacrifice sometimes of his or her own life, let alone sacrifice a political party in order to preserve the democracy, in order to preserve the Constitution, in order to preserve the rule of law. So if you cannot do that, don't talk to anyone about being patriot, because you are no patriot. Here is what I hope you get out of this. Our country is worth much more than any political party. Our country is worth much more than any individual. Even George Washington didn't believe it was too important for the country. He played his part, but he recognized the country is what's worth preserving. Our democracy, our Constitution, much more important than anyone, any single man. It may make you feel good for just a moment to say you're a Republican or to say you're a Democrat. But as I always say, don't make a crisis, or don't let a crisis become a tragedy, because the country is now in a crisis. You have a president who simply is not concerned about the country. We know that. There is no debate about that. Everything that the president does is for his own sake, is for his own benefit. But what is even worse is the fact that you have Republican member of Congress and Republican members of the Senate completely relinquishing their primary duty to exercise oversight on the executive branch, now to become a branch of the executive branch, going against the Democrats when they were supposed to work with the Democrat to exercise oversight on the executive branch. There is no if and but about it. This is the Constitution of the United States. It's not to be liked. It is to be done. If we do not want the Constitution anymore, maybe that's what you should say. You do no longer care about the Constitution of the United States. Because if you're still using the Constitution to cling to gun, right to bear arms, that means you either do not care about the rest of the Constitution, you do not care what happened to the United States of America, but you want to use, it's like a Christian, like to use verse which actually support whatever wrongdoing. But as far as the rest of the Bible, they don't care. And we're observing a similar behavior in the Republican Congress, in the Republican Senate. In order to leave a country to your children and your grandchildren, you cannot be defending a political party that's doing wrong to the country. You cannot be defending a political party that's undermining the Constitution. You cannot be defending a man or supporting a man who is undermining the Constitution of the United States. Adolf Hitler became a dictator in a democracy. He used the very tool of democracy to become a dictator. So the idea that it cannot happen in America is naive. If you want to prevent it from happening to America, it is time to call your congressman, your Republican congressman, to call your Republican senators and tell them you want them to stop holding the executive branch accountable. If you cannot do that, you already know that you are no patriot and you do not care about the United States of America. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, The Place for Common Sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time
for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the fourth branch, live from New York. Good day.